Are you a believer? This is the No Fear podcast. We know what scares you.
I'm Mel,
And I'm Lisa.
and this is the No Fear Cast, the podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. This is episode 12 of season 6, and we just finished a series on found footage. Our next series is going to be all about cryptids, so we thought we'd use this episode to look at a film about the search for Bigfoot that incorporates found footage. And that would be the movie Willow Creek.
All right, so you probably heard in our intro that Matt is not with us today. He will be with us next time. We're going to miss him as we discuss this Bigfoot movie. But as Mel just said, we are discussing the 2014 Willow Creek Bigfoot movie. And we did think that it was kind of a fun, a way to end, I guess, our found footage, because we already kind of ended our found footage series and we wanted to do something a little bit fun. So we thought we'd take a look at this one. A little bit about this movie. It was written and directed by Bobcat Goldthwait. It stars Bryce Johnson as Jim and Alexi Gilmore as his girlfriend Kelly. And the whole premise behind the film is pretty simple. Jim is a Bigfoot buff. I wouldn't quite call him a Bigfoot fanatic, but pretty close. He is somebody who I think has always been really intrigued by the legend of Bigfoot, and he references several times in the film that it's a creature that's meant a lot to him since he was a young boy, and it's always been a dream of his to go and see this particular place in California where that has a special connection to Bigfoot, and he wants specifically to make a documentary about it. So he takes his girlfriend Kelly and they go to Willow Creek, California, looking for Bigfoot. And that's pretty much the premise of the film. It's found footage, and the fact that all of the footage is shot either by Jim or Kelly. They're documenting everything, they're capturing everything on film with the hopes of editing it together later and making some sort of documentary. Although I will say it is very very low budget. Kelly and Jem kind of seem like they don't really know what they're doing as they're making this. And part, I think, of what really makes a film like this interesting is that it references places that are real in connection to the Bigfoot legend itself. So they specifically are going to a place in Northern California where the Patterson-Gimlin film was made. Now, for those of you who don't know about the Patterson-Gimlin footage, it was made in 1967. It's named after the people who gather the footage, but it supposedly captures the image of a female Bigfoot walking through the woods. Now, you've probably seen this if you've ever seen anything related to Bigfoot. It's pretty iconic, pretty famous. The Bigfoot is doing this kind of like stride through an opening in the trees and kind of looks over her shoulder at the camera at some point. So this is actually like real footage that they're talking about in the film. And this is what Jim, kind of drags Kelly along, but this is what Jim and Kelly have gone to see, is they want to get to the actual place where this Patterson-Gimlin film was made or was captured. And so they go around, they ask locals, and they eventually find it. What I found really fascinating about this is that the film itself, like Willow Creek, the film, was actually shot in the real location where the 1967 footage was captured. Now, I'm not going to get into whether or not that 1967 footage is real. There are some people who swear up and down that it's real, that it proves the existence. There have been several people who have come out and tried to prove that it was a hoax. And, I think even to the point that a man has come forward and said that he was the one in the costume. So, it's disputed footage, but it's related to the history nonetheless. And kind of it's kind of interesting. I think that's enough about the film right now. I have my thoughts certainly about this film, but I'm going to throw it to Mel first to just get your general take on Willow Creek.
Well, I found it really interesting. I didn't know anything about it until you mentioned it a few weeks ago, Lisa, probably like over a month ago, when we were talking about different options for, well, we knew we were going to talk about found footage, and we knew we were going to talk about cryptids. So we were keeping kind of a list of movies that we thought would be interesting. And so, yeah, this was my first, like, just even knowing it existed, and also my first time watching it. I liked it, but I had some issues with it. And I guess I won't really get into those too much now because we may even share the same ideas with that. The things that I thought were interesting about it is I liked the idea of like the fake, well, not kind of, it's not, well, it is a fake documentary, I guess, or a mockumentary in a way, because it's not real, it's a movie, but it's set up kind of um almost like it's a documentary. In fact, there's almost like a transition point in the movie where it shifts from that. And one of the reviews I was reading, they also noted this, that it kind of starts out as like an interesting, like, just piece on people who believe in Bigfoot and what it's like to live in this kind of kitschy town that has all these statues and museums about Bigfoot. And then all of a sudden, when they go into the wilderness to see Bigfoot, then you have like the Blair Witchy found footage part of it, because things start getting kind of creepy and you have people getting lost in the woods and those sorts of things. The original Blair Witch Project did that too. Matt and I talked about that in a couple Patreon episodes. And we talked a little bit about how it was interesting to have those interviews at the beginning that set things up. But I really felt like this movie, if I knew nothing about it going in, I would have almost thought that it was like a fake documentary about Bigfoot believers. Because they interviewed the people who appeared to be way more Bigfoot believer material than our character Jim. And one of the things I read said that these were real people that they were interviewing to get a real feel for like how a real interview would seem, or like they were people. So I don't know if the people were coached and they tried to do natural conversations or how they did that, but it had a similar feel to what they did in the Blair Witch Project. I liked the idea of the ambiguity of it for a little bit. The ambiguity is gone by the end, but they do kind of talk about how lots of people and animals are lost in the woods, which turns out it's most likely this Bigfoot thing or Sasquatch. But I like the ambiguity of the people talking also about how there are people doing things in the woods that they don't want you to stumble upon. They don't want to be reported or whatever. And so there's almost like this Flannery O'Connor type danger about the woods, because there could be people in there and you don't have witnesses and you're in a remote area. And at one point when they're trying to get into the wilderness, they run into a very unfriendly person. And so there's an ambiguity as to like what is causing them their issues. Is it a cryptid or is it people? I liked that. And I liked the fact that I felt like it was obviously indebted to the Blair Witch Project, but it used those things to its own advantage. So it wasn't just like, here's the Blair Witch Project, but with Sasquatch. I felt like it was doing really interesting things with the stuff that was going on in the woods that obviously if you watch Blair Witch Project, you're like, oh yeah. But they were adapting it for their own purposes, and I thought that was cool. One of my, I don't know if it's like concerns, but one of the things that kind of bothered me, especially at the end, is as far as I don't know, I might be wrong about this, Lisa, and you can tell me if I am, but I didn't really notice any framing material that let us know that this was found footage. Like in almost all the found footage movies we've watched so far, there's been something at the beginning that makes it clear that the people died or disappeared and the footage was found. In this, like, I missed that as a viewer. I missed some sort of framing technique to tell me what was going on and how this was being put together. So I may be wrong. Maybe there was something I missed, but I felt like as a viewer, I was just thrown into it. And if I hadn't known ahead of time a few things about it, it might have like made me a little bit more confused or hesitant about what was going on. What were some of your impressions?
Yeah, I'll echo what you said about the framing of it. A lot of times with this kind of found footage, you do hear what happened and like why you're getting it. Like there's either a sense of like, even if it's something very simple as this is part of the police investigation and you're now getting to like watch it or something, or as in the case of like Hell House, when somebody was making a documentary about a specific event and they've gathered the footage of the event itself and they're putting it together for you, and so it kind of forms a narrative. And one of the things we talked about with found footage is one of the things that makes it so scary when you have that narrative, that framework narrative around it. Okay, if this footage was found and not, edited together by the person who made the film. In this case, like it wasn't Jim editing it together and being like, oh, this is what happened when my girlfriend and I went into the woods, but rather it's found footage, oh, Jim and Kelly do not come out of it alive. And that adds kind of a sense of dread and impending doom and builds the suspense, I think, of it. Certainly, I think with something like Hell House, we saw that because you knew from the very beginning that something horrific happened. And they keep you in the dark about what it was that actually happened. They just tell you some people died, some people went missing, some people were badly hurt. But you don't really know what happens. And so you're watching, it's almost like you're watching a train wreck in slow motion. Like it's kind of horrific. But with something like this, on the one hand, like you were saying, I missed the framework because I wanted to know why we were watching this. What is the story here? But then at the same time, I thought I kind of liked that there was like, I don't know if I liked it. Maybe I'll say I understand why the decision was made not to have that framework narrative, because I think that would have cut out some of the ambiguity that you were talking about that is nice in this film. Because part of it, they've got this like Mulder and Scully dynamic that I really liked between Jim and Kelly, where Jim obviously really wants to believe in Bigfoot. Like he almost, I don't think we really know why, but he almost has this like deep desire to know that Bigfoot exists beyond just like a passing curiosity. And he's held on to it for a long time. And so part of me thinks like, why does he have that need to know that? Like, what is his real connection to this creature? But he really wants to believe. Kelly, on the other hand, she's pretty firmly, she's a non-believer. I wouldn't even really call her like a skeptic, because she kind of, you get the sense that she thinks it's silly that they're going to do this, but she's doing it because she loves Jim and she wants to do it for him. But at the same time, like, you just get the sense that she's just like, this is a little bit silly. So I like that they build that dynamic, because then you do have throughout is there something in the woods that is Sasquatch and that's dangerous? Or is there something in the woods that is just dangerous that maybe has a human explanation to it? So I think if we had just heard from the beginning, like these two went into the woods and they weren't found, but their footage was, it might destroy that a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of my thought on like why there was no framework. But I do agree with you. I did kind of miss that, because after watching all these found footage films, it just it felt obvious that that was missing from this. Like, why are we watching this? And how did we get this footage? Because it's clear by the end that Jim didn't edit it together.
There's no way he could have done that.
Yeah. Poor Jim.
Yeah, poor everybody. No, and I know you probably had more to say, so I'm not going to talk too much. But I liked your description of why they probably made the decision to not have a framework, but that we still miss it, because I feel like it just, in the found footage movies that I was watching and we were watching, it seems like that's just an important trope of that form. And so it seemed really glaring to me that it wasn't there. But I totally get your reasoning about it.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, I did really like a lot of the things in this film. I liked the dynamic between Jim and Kelly. I liked that they had the kind of Mulder Scully thing going. I liked the way that, I mean, I know we're going to compare this to Blair Witch the whole time, and I mean, it's Blair Witch Bigfoot indie movie mashup. Like, that's what this film is. But I like that, unlike Blair Witch gets into the woods pretty quickly, from what I remember. I mean, they have some time in the town beforehand, but it gets into the woods pretty quickly. And really, this movie spends at least half of its runtime getting to know the town, getting to know like the place around this area. And you pointed out, it's like what it's like to live in this kind of quirky place where everybody knows this legend and everybody has an opinion on it. Like, they go and eat at this diner that has, the Bigfoot burger. And there are several places that have, big murals painted of Bigfoot. And they're selling souvenirs, and people are telling stories about, oh, there was this one time I saw Bigfoot, or, something bad happened and we think it was Bigfoot. But then there are also the people like the old woman who had worked in the forestry building, like right outside where they're going in. She had worked there for decades, and they ask her flat out, do you believe in Bigfoot? She's like, nope. Just very matter of fact. And I really enjoyed that. I looked up a few details about this film because I was really, really curious to know. And there is a commentary about the making of this film, if you want to go and look into that just kind of talks about it. But some things that I found really fascinating, and one of those was that Goldthwait really did want to do what he called a Christopher Guest like movie. He wanted to go to a Bigfoot convention and make like a faux documentary, make a mockumentary about, people who believe in Bigfoot, and people who not only believe, but like build their lives around finding Bigfoot. But he ended up kind of switching and making what he made because he didn't want to feel like he was making fun of the people who did believe in Bigfoot. So I thought that was really interesting, because the entire first half of this film does feel like a bit of a mockumentary, but I also didn't feel like he was poking fun at the people of the town or the people who believe in Bigfoot, which was nice. I think that was a really, really kind of interesting thing. A few other things that I really liked about this, especially doing a little bit more research. So several of the, like you said, the townspeople and the places were actually real. And he ended up, getting people to sign releases to film, which I thought was a lot of fun. But when he was making this, now this is really fascinating, because I think what they pulled off is wonderful. The entire movie itself was shot in 5 days. So less than a week to shoot this movie. The script was a 25-page outline. And most of the dialogue was completely improvised. So Bryce Johnson and Alexi Gilmore, who played Jim and Kelly, they didn't know each other prior to this. And they decided to drive up to Northern California together so that they could get to know each other on the car ride. And that way they would feel like they had a real relationship by the time they got there, which I think they pulled it off really well. Um, and there's one particular scene where they're in a tent at night. This is by the time they get to the woods, and it's actually, it precedes like the Bigfoot attack. Spoilers. But that one tent scene is 18 minutes long, and this is not a long film at all. So it's 18 minutes. It's in the dark. And apparently, Goldthwait did not tell the actors what was going to happen. So he basically just put them in a tent at night in the place where the real Bigfoot film was supposedly captured, and gave them a camera. And then he went out and made all sorts of noises outside of their tent. It sounds very familiar and very similar to what I've read about how a lot of the Blair Witch movie was filmed. And I just find this kind of filmmaking fascinating. I think you can tell, particularly in that scene, that it was unexpected. And I love this kind of movie trivia. It's kind of like, and this is really infamous, so I'm sure a lot of our listeners know, but like, the chestburster scene in Alien, where the actors knew something was going to happen, but everything had been hidden from them. So they didn't know what was going to happen. So a lot of their reactions when the alien thing like actually comes out, they did not realize that that was going to happen. So they could get a genuine reaction. And I always find that kind of filmmaking really interesting. So, is this film a perfect film? I'm just going to go ahead and say no. Like, I don't think it is. I have, small bones to pick with it, but it's really fascinating, like, for what they were able to accomplish in such a short period of time. There's no, like, I mean, really, there's no like CGI, there's no like big effects, it's clearly done on a really minimal budget, but I think they pulled it off. Like, it's pretty effective.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's interesting kind of themes running throughout it. Like some of the things that were told in the stories and the mockumentary part happen in the second half when they go in the wilderness. The missing person poster kind of pops up at the end, which I know we'll have to talk about the end. The dialogue, like, I don't know, I think that trivia that you found about how they were improvising a lot, I can see that because a lot of their conversations seemed like awkward conversations you would have with local people, and their conversations, I started to empathize with them. There was nothing about this film that kind of let me not empathize with them. I have to admit, when it first started, I was a little irritated by Jim, and I felt kind of I was a little nervous. I wouldn't, not like I wouldn't be able to have empathy for another human being, but that I wouldn't be pulled into it. But I really was. Like, I still don't understand why he loved Bigfoot so much, but it was interesting to see him be excited about something that he's always been. Of course, you don't want to be curious about things in a horror movie, but be excited to possibly see something he's been curious about his entire life. But then at the same time, know that his kind of tragic flaw, if I can use such a term with a movie like this, is that he, like the woman who is the director of Blair Witch Project, is leading, someone out into the woods to do something that's probably going to end up pretty bad. I mean, there's again a scene where the camera is on the characters and he apologizes to Kelly because he was so excited and so curious that he didn't quite realize that he was making this terrible kind of deal, that when you go after these sorts of things, they can attack you, like all the wild animals that they kept being warned about before they went out into the wilderness. But yeah, I felt for them. I mean, even like the awkward proposal scene in the tent, I was like, they felt like real people, having a conversation. And I really felt for them during the 18 minutes in the tent. I was fascinated by that the camera literally just sat on them for, I mean, it felt like a while. I'm not surprised it was 18 minutes. I was thinking it was probably around 20. And yeah, they looked actually scared about some of the things that were happening, the knocking sounds, and when the tent was being poked, which reminded me a little bit of Blair Witch as well, but it was used kind of differently here. There was some jerky cam in the movie, and I know that is something that bothers you, Lisa, but that moment wasn't. I mean, it was literally just them like emoting into the camera because they were so shocked. So that's pretty cool that they didn't even know what was going to happen there, because I really feel like you get that surprise at those jump scares, because yeah, now I know they were shocked because they didn't know what was happening. But yeah, I cared for them, and I felt like the further they went in, the more human and like real they became to me, even in the mistakes that they were making, yeah, I don't know, I did like that aspect of the characters.
Yeah, I really did as well. I liked the characters, and I was thankful. Speaking of the shaky cam, I was thankful for that long tent scene that this that the camera was stationary on them for a while, because there were some moments in the beginning, especially when Kelly was trying to like hold the camera when he was doing the interviews, where it would kind of be shaky. And then definitely towards the end when they're like running and walking. Yeah, there was a reason I did not join you in your Blair Witch discussion, because I flat out said I couldn't watch it again. And I'm normally not, it's strange. I don't get motion sickness in other instances, but this kind of like shaky cam movies, I guess I'm sensitive to, because I will admit I came out of this movie with a headache, um
Yeah, and I thought of
which
you,
I didn't
especially
love.
during during some of the jerky movements when they were lost and it was daytime and the camera was jerking all over the place. Because, like I had told you, like watching the Blair Witch Project on the TV hasn't really bothered me. So I was surprised that I was bothered a little bit by the jerky camera motions in this one. So I'm sorry you got a headache. That's you sacrificed yourself for the viewing of this movie.
It was worth it. It was worth it, because I really did. I really really did enjoy. I really did enjoy this movie, and even though it did feel like a close cousin to Blair Witch, I that did not bother me. You know, yeah, I really just enjoyed it. So, but yeah, I think we probably ought to talk a little bit about the ending of the film and kind of what happens, because you're right when you said early on that they're walking this very fine line in, over the course of the movie, of whether or not this is going to be like, is Bigfoot real, or are they going to leave it ambiguous? Because honestly, I was thinking this as I was watching the movie. I was like, this could be a movie about two people who go looking for Bigfoot and get lost in the woods and never come out. Like, you don't need anything supernatural for the woods to be a terrifying place. Um, it, that happens all the time. And and now I will say this is not fair, because this movie was made, I think, in 2013. I've seen it dated 2013 and 2014, so I'm not sure on which is the actual release date on it. But this movie predated the actual documentary Sasquatch, which came out on Hulu. I want to say last year is when I watched it. Now, Sasquatch is a real documentary, and it's produced by the Duplass brothers, and it's about a a journalist named David Holthouse, who goes out into the woods in California to talk to people who say that they saw a Sasquatch or Bigfoot like kill a man. And so he wants to go investigate it. And the reason I was seeing so many comparisons is mainly because it took place in the same area. So he actually goes to the same place the night where the 1967 Patterson Gimlin film was captured. And he goes there to interview the people. So he's there at the same place that this Willow Creek was filmed. But what he ends up uncovering, and again, I won't get in too deep into spoilers for this documentary. It's, I want to say 3 or 4 episodes, and I highly recommend watching it. But he does end up getting in kind of into the criminal element, I guess I'll say. I'm really trying hard not to spoil everything that happens in that documentary, but like he gets really deep into that. I mean, he's an investigative journalist. That's what he does. So it was hard for me not to make the comparisons between Willow Creek, the kind of fake documentary, and Sasquatch, the real documentary. So part of me wanted this to be a movie that was just about these two people who go out into the woods completely unprepared, because neither one of them seemed very prepared for like wilderness life. And honestly, that scene towards the end, after the tent scene, when they wake up the next morning and Kelly is pretty insistent that she wants to go home. And then they realize that they're lost as they're trying to make their way back to their car. There's this like panic that rises up in her, where she's just like, I want to go home. I want to go home. I really just, we've been past this tree. I want to go home now. And I thought that felt very real. And I kind of wish the film had like played with that a little bit more, because there's something that is just so terrified about being alone in the woods. And you don't need like the Blair Witch, and you don't need Bigfoot. Like, it's scary enough. And sometimes just the like suggestion that there might be something out there is enough to be scary. So I will say that part of me was kind of hoping they were going there. Obviously, in the ending, they don't. They make a choice to say Bigfoot is very much real and out in the woods. I don't know. What do you think about the ending, Mel?
Well, I completely agree with what you're saying about how the woods are just scary enough, regardless of what's in them. Like, we don't even need the Blair Witch stick figures and rock cairns to be scary. Like, you're right. The second you see that panic in her face because she realized they don't know where they're going. Like, I mean, I was worried for them when the guy stopped them and told them to get out. And when their tent was ransacked, I was like, well, I assume it's Bigfoot because that's the point of this movie, but it could easily be something else. When they were walking, it was obvious they weren't on a real path. Like, he didn't really know where he was taking them. He was just so excited to get to where he wanted to get to. I think she even mentioned that at some point, that she doesn't understand like where they're even walking to. They don't even have, do they even have a map? I don't even feel like they have a map, but they just have a compass.
No. And well, that was one of the terrifying things too, that I wished they had kind of like the movie had lingered on a little bit more. And that was that they didn't have a map, and that really the sole directions that they were given
was a creek on one side and something on the other, right?
Yeah. And it was like, as long as you can hear the creek on your left side and you can see the hill up on your right, and you keep walking where that like stays true, like just keep walking where you hear the creek on your left and you see the hill on your right, like you're gonna hit the spot. And I was like, those aren't directions.
No, they're not.
That's not a map. Like that, I mean, right away and then, I mean, that was already the really the first thing. It was like, they're not prepared to go out here. And then when that guy gets, and he doesn't just tell them like to turn around and go home. Like, he gets aggressive with them, with them still being in the car. So yeah, right there, I mean, you're thinking, I know myself well enough to know that I'm not prepared to be in the woods, like in any way, shape, or form. And,
this is good to
they're
know.
Not either.
Yeah. We need a map, a clear trail with markings. No, and yeah. I don't know about you, but I felt like the ending was really rushed. Like, I was like it not enjoying, but like, into the rising dread, I guess, and being like, ooh, what's going on? What's happening? I'm creeped out. And then the poking into the tent and the pushing their tent around, that was creepy. And I guess I don't know. I'm not sure how they would have kept it going, but it didn't seem to me, I think it was only maybe 10 minutes. That's a spoiler, I guess, for sure, but there's not much time after their tent gets leaned on and whatnot before. And I mean, it is effective when they're in the dark and she's got the stick and he's like saying, I'm sorry. It's totally effective. But it just, I don't know. I'm not sure what exactly I wanted, but I felt like watching the movie that it was kind of like, and this isn't to say I didn't like it. I did enjoy the viewing of it, but I felt like it was kind of lopsided. Like I felt like I needed more after the tent to keep the dread and fear going than to just all of a sudden fall off into the camera flopping around and people screaming and we're not 100% sure what's going on, which was scary and pretty effective because I don't know if I want to see precisely what happened to Jim. But I felt like I don't know. What did you think about that? Do you agree that it was like too fast, that we went down the hill too fast to the end?
Yeah, yeah, I have a couple of comments about the end. So basically, listeners, we said we were going to spoil it. After the tent scene, Kelly really prompts Jim to pack up and get to the car as anybody would. And there is kind of a false sense of safety because everything up to this point, like everything truly scary and kind of threatening has, at least with Bigfoot, has happened during the night. So there's kind of a sense of, oh, it's morning, they're going to pack up and get to their car. But of course, it's a horror movie, so you know it's not going to end that way. And they pack up, and Jim, frustratingly, is still kind of obsessed with his search for Bigfoot. And so he finds this kind of clump of bloody hair, it looks like, and uh, he bags it. It's like he's going to take it home. I'm still unclear what he thought he was going to do with it because I was like, you don't even have a map to go into the woods. Like, are you going to tell me you have a lab at home to test this? Like,
But he had
Jim
a
was
Ziploc bag just in case he
I
found
mean,
hair.
he had a bag and he had a glove, but I was like, I still was unsure with what this trip seems so ill planned to me. But anyway, he stopped to get the hair, and she's practically begging him at this point to get home. They pack up, they walk. She realizes at some point that they're pretty much walking in circles. And again, I don't, if this had been Blair Witch, they would have been walking in circles because the witch was bewitching them, like that she was making it where they couldn't leave. In this case, I didn't get the sense that it was anything supernatural other than they walked in there without a map and they didn't know how to get back home. And so they were kind of going in circles. And night falls rather quickly. As night approaches, they realize they're not going to make it back to their car, and they hear the creature, whatever it was that had been outside their tent. They hear it. And then when night falls, that's really kind of when the ending for me gets way too fast. It almost was like if you blink, you miss it, because there's a lot of panic. You already can't see except for, like, I guess like a little flashlight or like the light from the camera. So you're not even sure what you're looking at. I will say there is a very effective jump scare when they swing the camera around. They see the woman who had been missing from the she was in like the missing persons poster, like very early on in the film. They kind of swing and see her standing there, like naked, looking terrifying. And then it swings out, and then you're right. It's like something happens to Jim, but we don't really see it because it's off camera and there's so much chaos. And then it just kind of rushes to the end. And I did not really like that. I wished I don't know. I just kind of wished we had gotten more. Now, that being said, for a film that has no that had really no budget and that had no script and that basically just had an outline, I thought that played they played up to the ending well. Like, I did feel satisfied in that it was leading there because we saw the missing woman's poster, and Jim and Kelly spend some time at the diner talking about the poster, and they even kind of have this like morbid joke going about what's going to happen when Kelly goes missing, and like what is her picture going to be, she like she goes so far as to even like pose for it. And the whole time, all you're seeing this mural behind them of like a Bigfoot, well, two big feet. Is that the Bigfoots?
I
I don't
feel
know what the
like
plural is.
I feel like it should be Bigfoots, but that just sounds so weird. But big
Well, there are
feet sounds strange
two
too. Yeah.
Sasquatches. There are two Sasquatch. There are
Nice
two
fix there.
creatures.
Yeah.
Um, in the mural, one of them, which they say, "Oh, that's you, Kelly," like cooking over the fire, and then that's me. I'm the boy, Bigfoot, coming to bring you flowers. And so there's this sense of like there's like a family community of like all of these Bigfoot creatures out there. And I thought that was kind of fun because you get a sense that, like, okay, number one, they're totally going missing because they've been making the jokes about what their missing, picture is going to be on the poster. But then also, you kind of get the sense that now they're being like forcibly taken into this community that they were talking and joking about being a part of. Because obviously, like, I don't know, Bigfoot is not, well, he might have done away with Jim, but like the women that this Bigfoot is taking seem to be alive, maybe not alive and well, but alive.
I think they're probably alive and
So
traumatized.
alive and traumatized, definitely. They're being like forcibly integrated into the Bigfoot community, but so like I did like that aspect. I liked the way that, for a film like this that was done, so much of it was improvised, that they still managed to kind of weave the theme throughout so well. But I did think the ending was missing a little something.
Yeah, I agree. I liked how you mentioned that Blair Witch implied there was something supernatural making them get lost, and this was literally just people getting lost in the woods, which is so real. And I don't want to retread that because that was a really interesting point that you made. But one thing that I thought was interesting was that scene where it's still light, but it's kind of getting dusky, and they've kind of almost like given up, and he sees the Bigfoot prints and he's like trying to get video of them, and something comes out of the bush at Kelly. Like, I actually rewound because I was like, are we actually going to see something? And I don't think we really did. But you hear the roaring. And that was something else I thought was interesting, is like there is an urgency, not just because she thinks they're lost, but because even before the sun goes down, they find out that they've been being stalked the whole time, even in the daytime. And so you even lose that idea of, well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen at night. And I wonder too, like, even if they had a map, like, I feel like their fear and anxiety is also causing them to be lost. Like, that's another aspect. It's not supernatural. It's like, we don't have a map and we're not prepared, we're not lost, and we're being stalked by whatever this is. But yeah, I also interpreted, when they were making fun of the woman on the missing poster, I was like, yeah, that's pretty much what's going to happen to these guys. And that's kind of how I interpret the end, is like Kelly's still alive at the end, apparently, because she's screaming that she wants someone to help her. So we don't know if she dies or is taken back to some sort of weird, well, I guess I shouldn't be judgmental against the Bigfoots, but some sort of culture that they have in the wilderness. I felt like Jim was dead. Did you feel like there was an opening that he couldn't be dead? I thought he was like in pieces, basically, from the sounds of what was going on.
Yeah, I think from the sounds we can pretty much say rest in peace, Jim, or rest in pieces.
Nice.
I hate to. um, no, yeah, I don't think Jim makes it through. I think Kelly does. I think Kelly has met the same fate as the missing woman on the poster that they saw. Like, I think she has now been taken into the community, which, that's another thing that I thought was really interesting. I mean, obviously, I don't know what this film is saying about like Bigfoot communities. They're taking human women, at least in this film. This is like what they're positing. They're taking human women and forming some sort of community with them. And the whole movie was about like Jim and Kelly, and like they obviously had a great relationship, but Kelly had made a comment at some point when they were driving to the woods that she wanted to go to Los Angeles. She was an actress, and she, I think, wanted to kind of move her career to the next level. And Jim did not want to. Like, he loved her, he wanted to support her, but that he didn't want to make the move there. Like, he talked about, how he didn't enjoy LA and didn't want to live there. And then he actually proposes to her in the tent. And it's a really sweet moment. Like, I thought it came across as really genuine. She says that it's too soon, and I think she's worried about, obviously what's going to happen, like if she marries him and he doesn't want to move with her. And she makes a comment, well, like maybe we try living together first. And kind of the implication that like move to LA for me first and see. But they end up, it's not that kind of like, oh, he proposed and I said yes and we're overjoyed. Like, they don't fully break up, but their relationship is in a really precarious position, which I find kind of interesting, because then to think that, like, I don't know, how much does Bigfoot know, right? Like, is he intentionally taking women who he thinks are not? Or like, is that why he had to kill Jim? Because he was like, I have to get the man out of the way and then I'm just going to take the woman. I don't know, but there was because every time they saw a mural, it seemed to be two of the Bigfoot creatures together. So I don't know. It was just maybe I'm reading way too much into this film, but there there did seem to be this, how they were building up this like kind of precarious relationship between Jim and Kelly, and then she's going to kind of be forcibly taken into this community that she doesn't want to be a part of. It was just kind of interesting what they were doing. Maybe they didn't even know what they were doing, but the themes were still kind of there, which was kind of a cool playground that they built.
Wow. I hadn't, I mean, my interpretation, I guess, was yes, that the Bigfoot creatures were taking the women, but I hadn't really connected them to the mural. That's an interesting way of looking at it, because even the characters were trying to interpret the mural in the movie. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we need a sequel to explain this to us. Maybe when the Bigfoot creature or whoever it was pushing on the tent and yelling and making the knocking noises, maybe they overheard what was going on between the two of them, like their conversation. Maybe the Bigfoot creatures are just people who want to live in the woods and be left alone in like disguise. The possibilities are endless.
Yeah. It is kind of fascinating. Like, I'd love to know, I mean, that's because this movie does posit that Bigfoot is real. And so I would love to know a little bit more about Bigfoot culture too. Like, why are they taking the women?
I feel like no matter what podcast you and I are on, we always end up in these moments.
Yeah. Yeah. But, and also like, because she makes a point really early on in the film, Kelly does, where she says, I just don't believe in Bigfoot because we would have found evidence, like a body, we
Right,
would have
right.
found a body. And he says, well, how do you know they don't bury their dead?
Hmm.
And I thought that was really fascinating because I think and granted, I don't know much about like the Bigfoot community, like the people who are really into finding Bigfoot. I don't know very much about that. But I do know that a lot of them kind of think that the Bigfoot community, back to the plurals, these creatures have their own like society with its own rules and it's that they're a lot more kind of intelligent and organized than we would think, and that's why they've been able to stay kind of secret and hidden this whole time, which this movie seems to support that theory. And now I'm just kind of fascinated to know, like, what is this Bigfoot culture like what is their do they have towns, do they have family units, what's going on? It's just fascinating.
Well, I mean, they have a language in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also was struck by that conversation about do they bury their dead? And I think that even though even though Jim wants to find Bigfoot, and even though he says that to her, I almost wonder if he's saying those things because he's wanting to be disagreeable with her. Like he's wanting to play up the fact that he believes and she doesn't. Because at the same time, he can be really flippant about Bigfoot. Like he doesn't take it seriously. It can be a threat to him, even though it's this huge creature. I'm not sure that he necessarily takes it seriously that there could be this culture or society that you're positing. And so it's weird because he's like curious about it, but maybe he doesn't respect it enough. And maybe that's part of like an outside person coming into something they don't understand. Like they're not prepared, they don't
Yeah.
get it, they're not properly respectful about it, even if you believe. I mean, they're just playing with fire, basically, whether they believe or they don't.
I mean, clearly he does not come to it with the respect that it deserves, because I mean he doesn't come to the wilderness with the respect it deserves.
Right, right.
He's not prepared to walk into the woods. That is clear. So I think that's just part of his problem in general. But also, now this is a little bit of a theory here. He mentions his love for Bigfoot goes back to his childhood. And given that he's probably, I don't know, I would say maybe he's like in this film, like 5 years younger than me. What are the chances he saw Harry and the Hendersons and that's his idea of Bigfoot? I mean, like you see the like Hollywood fun version of it, and then you're met with the real version.
The horror of it.
I don't know. Yeah, and so you fully experience something that you're not at all prepared for.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really, when I think about Bigfoot or Sasquatch, I've never wanted to run across one because I don't want to run across something that could be dangerous, you know?
No,
I mean,
no.
it's terrifying. If it's real, then that's great. Bigfoot can live in the woods and be happy, but I don't want to have an encounter. Like that would be terrifying. I mean, it is a thing of horror, and you're right. He kind of almost treats it like with a childlike wonder and lack of respect. And it's almost like he's more interested in the pop culture aspects of it than even the real creature.
Yeah. Yeah, I almost wonder, and I think this just goes back to, when I was teasing about what is he going to do with that little tuft of hair. But like part of me wonders what he was hoping to get out of this. Like, was he hoping to get some film like the Patterson Gimlin film, where he was just going to see through the trees this like blurry creature walking? Like, what kind of encounter was he hoping to get out of it? Because, yeah, I think you're right. I think any person who really thought, yes, I believe in this, I would think would be scared to have a true encounter, like up close and personal. It'd be one thing to try to get proof, through hair, through footprints, whatever. Maybe even capture some of those sounds on audio recording and, try to decode them later. But an up close and personal encounter, like that's, like I think rattlesnakes are kind of cool, but I'm not going to hold one.
Yeah. I mean, I think mountain lions are majestic, but I don't want to be around one that's hungry.
Right. I mean, it's just, anyway, I don't know, Jim. I feel bad for Kelly because she only went because she loved you. And I just don't think you were prepared for anything.
Well, all I know is, Lisa, that if I ever do go into the wilderness, which I'm probably not going to do, I'm going to make sure I have a compass and I know how to use it properly, and I have a map and I have enough food and water to make it through. And possibly I have an expert with me who can help me and help protect me. And I'm going to make sure after watching this movie that I have some sort of Bigfoot pepper spray so that I can protect myself, because I really don't want to be attacked by a Bigfoot or kidnapped by one. So, listeners, with that, we hope that you enjoyed our discussion of the movie Willow Creek. If you have not seen it, we encourage you to check it out. I think it was a really interesting way to bridge our two series between found footage and our series that's coming, cryptids. And we hope that, if you're bothered by spoilers, that you paused and watched it before you came back. We're at No Fear Cast on Twitter and Instagram, and we have a Facebook page. Our email is nofearcast@gmail.com. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting us on Patreon and get access to exclusive content, or simply rate and review us, which is entirely free and helps other listeners find us. Theme music is by Nicholas Gasparini. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.